Welcome to Four Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer lives and careers on everything: countries, companies, couples, and careers. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's Four Quarter Lives, I talk with Laurie Kilby and Katie Waldegrave, co-founders of Now Foster, a bold new initiative reimagining how we recruit and support foster children. Laurie, a former social worker, and Katie, co-founder also of Now Teach, have teamed up to tackle one of the most urgent and overlooked social issues of our time, the crisis in foster care. Their innovation? A fresh, flexible model of foster support called Weekenders, offering children in care consistent, caring adult relationships, one weekend a month. In this conversation, we explore why fostering fits so powerfully into life's third quarter, the myths that prevent people from stepping forward, and how Now Foster is aiming to make fostering a national civic duty rather than an act of heroic and expensive sacrifice. Listen up. So Laurie Kilby and Katie Waldegrave, welcome to Four Quarter Lives. Delighted to have you.
Thank you for having us.
So before we get into all the details, let's get kind of the introduction to what is Now Foster and what sparked the idea.
So what is Now Foster is essentially a way of trying to recruit more people to become foster carers and get involved in the foster care system. And we love to keep telling you about that. In terms of what sparked the idea, at least for me, was really a journalist called Martin Barrow, who's also a foster carer. Many years ago now, just pre-COVID, I was running a thing called Now Teach, which you and I have talked about before, Avivah, which is about getting Q3ers, if you like, career changers into teaching. I started that with Lucy Kellaway of the FT, and that carries on and is great.
Very successful. You've managed to convert hundreds of Q3ers into becoming teachers.
We really have. Average age around 50, and it's been really exciting. And what was exciting was, I suppose, helping people surprise themselves, finding themselves aged 55, starting out as a teacher, which was not something they'd have perhaps anticipated. And I guess the challenge was the same one. Could we help people who'd never thought seriously that they might become a foster carer to do that? And Martin wrote to me talking about Now Teach and said, this is great, but someone needs to do this for foster care. And despite the fact that I'd started out in teaching in the most challenging schools with Teach First, and had been working there longer than I care to say, certainly since 2003, I didn't know nearly enough about it, like a lot of people. And he's 100% right. We face, and it's worse today than it was then, a massive recruitment crisis, and the outcomes for kids are simply not good enough. We're failing the most vulnerable kids in our society. And so the thinking was, could we do anything? What could be done? And I started researching and talking to experts in the sector. And really, it was a kind of curiosity and interest. And life happened. COVID came. I had another baby, plugging away at it in a kind of, but not really knowing where I was going with it until I met Laurie. At that moment, at least as far as I was concerned, we began to think there might be something we could do. And we have been doing it, therefore, for some time. The key thing has always been, how can we make fostering, if you like, more mainstream? The way we thought that you might achieve that has evolved. So what Now Foster primarily is now is our sort of flagship program, if you like, is called Weekenders. And the mission there is to say it is not realistic to expect the majority of people to drop everything and become full-time foster carers sort of overnight to children. It's a huge thing. It's a huge step to open up your life in that way. And we need to make a route in. We need to consider a role like any other, where you need to be able to step into something with a degree of confidence, experience, and so on. And so the model, if you like, is a new kind of foster care, which we're calling Weekenders. The idea being that you become a little like a foster aunt or uncle or grandparent. When, of course, a child is taken into care, they don't just lose the relationship with their parent, but with that wider network family, which are so crucial, not only to us, to the child, but to us as parents. I know I would struggle without my mum and the rest of my extended family to support me with my kids. And so the idea there was, how can you build we could build long-term relationships. This is not, if you like, was sort of one-off. This is the same child regularly over a lifetime. And when they're when they age out.
Around the idea of just one weekend a month.
One weekend a month. Right? Though we hope that can evolve. And, now you've got two households and, I don't know, during the holidays, this kind of thing. It will evolve and change. You've got two sets of families. And that is the simple idea. And there's lots that comes with that research. But that's what we're trying to achieve, because we need to change the system, all the obvious human reasons, and being blunt about it, for sort of economic reasons. It is costing this country a huge amount of money to fail these children. That doesn't make any sense for anybody.
So, Laurie, give me a bit about the failure side. I mean, Katie's the teacher who came in. Your side of this deal had deep experience in fostering. So tell us a little bit about what's the crisis we're facing.
Yeah, so at the time of meeting Katie, I was working as a social worker at the time, and I was finding more and more that I was utterly failing children in my practice. I didn't have enough foster carers. I didn't have the right foster carers. I was facing, the day before I met Katie, supporting a 7-year-old to move into a residential setting, which is unbelievable to be having to do at such a young age as 7. So essentially we're talking about a children's home where they don't get up till sort of a certain time. There's a changeover of staff, there's locked doors. And so I was at a point where I was really questioning what I was doing as a social worker. I then started to think about what could we be doing differently. Literally the next day, I ended up in a conversation with Katie in which our sort of two worlds collided, and pretty inseparable since with this idea.
That's a miracle meeting. I mean, sometimes the universe just calls at the right moment and throws people together. Katie, you have quite a bit of experience from Now Teach on these midlife transitions. So why do you think fostering fits so well into this phase? What makes it, now you have some experience in it, what makes it appealing to midlife adults?
Well, it's a bunch of stuff. One of them is, of course, as we know, we are living longer, and that's fantastic, the whole Q3 opportunity. And one of the implications or linked to that is, of course, that people are having children later in life. And if it seems to me that there is an extended period of time where people are likely to be very active, working, all the rest of it, not yet grandparents, which they probably would have been a couple of generations ago. And that crucial intergenerational relationship between younger and older people isn't necessarily able to be there in quite the same way. And people crave it. Also, of course,
a number of people who won't be grandparents, their children,
and who will never be grandparents. Exactly. They're opting out, or, they can't. And actually, this is a different way of doing that. It's a way that allows for a little more freedom than, it's a different way of doing that. Two, that as we all know, there used to be this sort of idea of retiring and you sort of drift about on the golf course or something. We know that's neither desirable nor realistic for most of us, but we also know that the sense of purpose and connection is perhaps the most significant thing that we all continue to need. In a way, sort of, not selfishly, that's the wrong word, but for ourselves, we need to continue to be useful in a part of the world. And in a sense, there feels to me there is nothing more purposeful than something like this. So I think it's that mix of purpose, connection, mutually beneficial relationships between older and younger person, and being part of a system, doing something good for that system and understanding something.
So you've now launched this, I think, totally brilliant idea of weekenders. I mean, that really is just the innovation. It's such an obvious innovation to meet the need. When did you start officially? And who's saying yes? What kind of people are stepping forward and attracted to this model?
Yeah, so we launched a few years ago in actually recruiting weekenders. We started a small pilot. We grew a bit bigger last year. And finally to this year now, sort of launching across 10 London local authorities. So we're recruiting across the whole of London. I might just circle a bit back onto the concept of weekending and what it is, to give a bit of an overview before then looking at the people that are saying yes once we know a bit more about it. So the idea of weekending is to bring more safe adults into children's lives. There was a care review done by Josh McAllister the year before last that said that children, when they leave care, should have 2 or more safe adults in their life. The reality is they have one or none. And this is having a massive impact on the outcomes for children.
I mean, most people aren't very familiar with the system. I certainly wasn't. So basically, they turn 18 and they are forced out of foster care into adulthood, and that's it. There's no connection necessarily.
There are some scenarios. So yes, they can stay where they are going. One of the biggest challenges is that when they turn 18 on their 18th birthday, the finances attached to their care completely changes. So children could stay where they are, but I suppose the finances are significantly reduced. And many full-time foster carers actually require the finances to pay their mortgage, put their lights on. So we've created a system which then essentially puts pressure on them to take another child that is under 18. So this child has to gravitate out of their home. We do know there are some cases where this isn't the truth and some families make it work, but actually for those that require it, they just possibly can't. And so we actually create a scenario where we teach children sort of how to sever relationships, and that 18 is an arbitrary number means that you're an independent adult, which I think many of us will agree is just not a truth, but yet that's what the system reflects.
And I was only going to add to that there may have been a time when people left home at 18. I think it was quite a long time ago. I believe the average age now is 25 with, clearly a lot of variance. That's 7 more years that most people get the opportunity to be at home if that's what they need. So.
Yeah. So what we're looking at doing is we match a child when they're sort of stable where they're living, when they can accept another safe adult in their life, and we match them to their weekenders for a weekend a month. So it's the same child. You learn all about them. They learn about you, sort of an uncle, grandparent, role model, and you do fun things with them. You top them up. Like I've got a weekender myself, so I've got a brilliant 14-year-old boy, and he says it's all the fun, no school run, which I quite like. Essentially just giving children new experiences, opportunities. A byproduct is that the full-time carers get a break. We're working in a place where full-time carers often have to beg to have a break. Like Katie spoke about, the support of mum and family. It's just not reflected really in foster care. So yeah, like my weekend looks like Marvel marathons or supporting his independent living skills or metal detecting for a whole week. Lots of negotiation, lots of fun, and just a delightful thing in my life.
So who is saying yes? What's the profile of the kind of people attracted to the idea of weekending?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's a really niche group of people that foster. So essentially, we want to sort of open up the funnel at the top to get more fantastic people coming through. So in terms of their sort of profile, they're quite altruistically motivated. So they want to make a difference. It's quite social justice orientated. They tend to be busy people. They tend to work full time, but yet have lots of transferable skills from different professions, can advocate for themselves, can advocate for the kids, can really wrap around children and sort of top them up with opportunities. What I think is great about weekending is that lots of people have to think like, why can't I do this? Rather than why can I? And that is the conversation changer that we're creating here, that we should be looking at ourselves and we're saying, why are we not supporting these children who are our responsibility?
Yeah, so really the goal is to get completely different kind of, let's say it, socioeconomic class of people who aren't dependent on this for their income, but who are doing it for other motivations that might be a little bit more child-centric.
It's the full range. And at the moment, like Laurie says, it's too niche. It's all word of mouth, recruitment, and we don't, that funnel is way, way too narrow. And the result of that is that the burden we place, like Laurie was saying, on the people who are doing it is far, far too extreme. And we're very hopeful that one of the very first sort of benefits might be because there is the concept of respite exists in foster care. It's typically used when things have gone kind of wrong, essentially, when the foster carer themselves may be facing burnout or when it's just all become too overwhelming. We think that if every child, where appropriate, had foster weekender, then that other family have the space that they may need. The primary carers will have a breathing space to just be, and that we hope would mean that children won't have what they face too often now, which is they have to move on, they have to move out, family, it breaks down. And that's what we think it could, in the first place, really help that they can stay put.
And I think we often say like we're the opposite of respite. People might not understand this term in the way that it's currently used in foster care, but essentially it's used to at crisis point usually. So say something is breaking down, there's a problem, something is unplanned, or a carer needs a holiday or a wedding or something called respite is currently used. Often the children don't know this adult. They will often use terminology like they're shipped off. And if we think of sort of what the word respite actually means, it means a break from something very challenging, terrible, difficult. And what must that tell children about themselves if that is the word that they have for when their carers need actually some time? And so we really come from the opposite side of that. It's really about putting kids at the forefront of this. This is their weekender, this is their time, and this is their person. It's not done to them. Fundamentally, a child-focused programme in which we've actually have children putting themselves forwards for, which is just not what you see in the world of respite.
So what's the
village concept?
Yeah, it takes a village, absolutely. So what are the first reactions of these kids who have benefited from the weekender concept? What do they say?
We're still in the very sort of early stages of the children that will be sort of benefiting. We've got sort of ad hoc references in regards to how I've been involved in weekending, and Sarah, our CEO, has been a weekender for 12 years. There was a piece on the BBC just the other week about their journey, and we actually went and watched her young person star as the main character in Everyone's Talking About Jamie. And so she will credit Sarah and their relationship in her theatre addiction. And she's now going off to study that at university, musical theatre, triple threat. And
wonderful, great story.
Ambassador.
Fantastic. So the idea is really, that's a really good example of broadening the influences that these kids are open to, making a much more enriched access to hobbies, ideas, books, intellect, backgrounds that gives them creativity and options that they might not otherwise even ever hear about.
Exactly that. And that thinking of the village analogy, that you've now got a sort of co-parent, if you like. There are now more adults who can talk to one another and the child and figure out, what's going on in that person's life. So, yeah.
So you guys are there's a bigger ambition here of sort of system change. And you've said that fostering often happens a little bit in the shadows, that nobody really knows anything about this who's outside of the system. What do you think needs to bring it into the light? And what are the biggest myths you guys are trying to bust here?
I think, and Laurie will speak to this too, but I think when we did the research about what stops people foster care, because it's not true to say that people don't think about it, though it is true to say people mostly don't actually know how to define it. Everybody knows how to define adoption, but fostering is a more complex sort of fungible, and it does include everything from the what is currently called respite that Laurie was describing, all the way through to relationship that goes for the majority of a child's life. So people are unsure what it is. And then I think that there is a strongly sort of negative perception, wrongly, of the kind of children who come into care. And particularly because where it has gone on, where we have already failed them, and perhaps they've been sent off to a children's home where the outcomes have not been great. There are those stories. But the fact is, at the beginning of it all, they're just kids. And they're just kids who need people to love them. But given all the sort of fear around it and and the anxiety and the fact that it is a high, if you were to start off and fail the kid, that's a hell of a thing you've done for that child. So you do want to be really sure. Given all of that, I think the thing we want to do is just to bring the concept of foster care and children care and all the rest of it into more and more people's lives. It may not be that it's ever right for you, but if your sister is doing it and you're talking about it and you are also part of that network. So I think, I sometimes think it's a bit like prisons. It just sort of exists as a thing that people don't understand on the side. And part of that on the side is sort of is the general advocacy. You know, there's the direct advocacy. We want weekenders to support their children with doing, whether that's, you know, getting their elbows out for something or other, or opening up opportunities, but also sometimes the more system level advocacy that may be required to understand, for example, the extent to which profiteering organizations make enormous amounts of money out of foster care, particularly when it goes wrong, and residential care, and understanding the systemic problem. You know, in grand scheme of things, we're not talking about an unsolvable problem, I don't think, when, you know, there are sort of probably 80,000-ish children in care in this country. It's a lot of children. And yet, if you think of it in terms of sort of the number of big secondary schools, it's not unsolvable. When you think of the reaction we had to Ukraine and the number of people stepping forward, people want to help. They want to do the right thing, the good thing. They want to make things better, but need a way to do so that isn't too overwhelmingly sort of off-putting. And I think then to understand that, you know, on a purely hard-nosed economic basis, those children, if you simply wanted to look at the economics of the thing, those children, as a teacher, I knew it, we know it, but those children are most likely to be the ones who go on to be economically inactive, as it is at the moment. There's too much of a pipeline into this criminal justice system and so on, because I think those civic children at the beginning, but because we're failing them. And that's extremely expensive. And at the minute when it goes wrong, it's not unheard of at all for a residential placement to cost sort of £250,000. It makes Eton look like a cheap option. And that would perhaps be, arguably, that'd be absolutely right if they were then going on to have fantastic lives. They're not. Children brought up in care die younger. This isn't about do they go to university and get great jobs. They don't live as long. They don't live as healthily. They don't get great jobs. They end up too often homeless. So there's a pure economic proposition where it doesn't work. And yeah, it's understanding at a kind of system level. And it might be that someone is never going to become a weekender, but is really a writer or a thought leader or works in policy. It's like everything. We need more of us engaged in owning, sense of ownership over a system. You can't parcel bits off of it.
Yeah. So, Laurie, I want to go to scaling this. This is an incredibly inspiring vision that, you know, you can motivate a whole country to kind of take in hand the kids left a little bit to the side. You've piloted in Ealing. You said you expanded across 10 London boroughs. Give me a sense of the 5-year vision. What are you guys dreaming of? And what would it take to see this weekending become a new category of care nationwide, established and normalized?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head for what we want. So the vision is that weekending becomes a type of foster care that's picked up sort of by the DFE, and that every child where the Department for Education, in that every child where appropriate has a weekender, that we get away from this concept of respite and breakdowns, and that actually we build support around children. So that is our long-term aim. We're philanthropically funded at the moment to sort of work with these local authorities. How we sort of go on to the next step, either outside of London or grown within London, or how we test our model working in different ways with local authorities outside of here, is going to be our next step really for the new year, next year.
Wonderful. I wish you huge tons of good wins on this project that I think needs and deserves and is urgently on the agenda. Give me a little bit of a sense of, Katie, this is new to you. You've been looking at this now for a few years. What's changed in you? What's been its impact on the two of you having now played with this idea, piloted it, and gotten it off the ground?
I want to say in the first place, a great friendship. That's been pretty exciting for me. But I think for me, I know that my partner and I, and perhaps this is wrong, we wouldn't have become full-time foster carers whilst we still have 3 small children, which we do, because I don't want to take on something that I can't do well, and I would be uncertain about that. But we do hope to have, to be matched with a weekend. And I think that would be amazing for my kids. I think it would be fantastic for us as a family, the sense of purpose, all of that. And actually a little bit like with Now Teach, I think it gives me a kind of optimism for the future. With Now Teach, it was super inspiring just seeing people who'd been, they'd been working as whatever. We had everything from circus performance to sort of trading, banking people. Yeah. Who'd been doing that for, 30 years or so, and then train and start all over again as teachers. And they used to say that made them feel young, I think, because we associate being young with being surrounded by young people and learning stuff and having a sense of sort of excitement about the future. And I think, again, that gives this. There's no age limit on, you have to be 21 to become a foster carer. Beyond that, there's no age limit. And as long as people are healthy and well, they can do it for as long as possible. So the idea that, I'm at that stage, my youngest is 5, he just lost his first tooth, I can't bear it. But I can continue to have young people in my life and get a sense of purpose from it. So I think there's all of those sort of things on a more personal level. And from the sense of people, whether it's the local authority or the people who are coming forward wanting to be weekenders or the current foster carers in the system, people thinking this is a good idea, this is what we need. And that's exciting to feel like, you could be helping in that way. So those are some of the things for me.
Yeah, so a bit, I can hear the passion of the intergenerational richness, plus just the attractiveness and obvious solution-driven of the prospect itself of fixing what's at crisis point. Laurie, what about you?
I think there's a few things on this for me. For me, on a personal level, this is the best thing that I do. I am the luckiest person to be able to be a weekender and have the input in my young person's life. Like the joy he brings me from the way he either challenges me or the way he makes me see things differently or looking at things through his eyes is just phenomenal. And I think people should have more of an opportunity to have that purpose. It's win-win for him. It's win-win for me. The first day he walked in my living room, kicked his shoes off, jumped over my sofa, turned the heated blanket on. I was like, oh, I'm in, my heart is exploding. Okay, we're doing this. So that's how I've entered it. And I just think the way I'm seeing sort of children who have siblings in care but are separated, often because there's not enough bedrooms for a weekend a month. They're sharing a bedroom, they're building a den, they're putting their feet up on each other and watching movies together, that they're doing things that siblings do. I'm seeing kids that are in care who are maybe questioning their gender and their sexuality, and maybe their carers aren't really sort of well versed. They're being matched with people that look like them, that sound like them, that use the same pronouns. This is the stuff that is going to change these kids' lives. We've seen with Sarah's weekend, they went to watch We're Going on a Bear Hunt as one of their first activities together, and it's the only time this child has ever sat still. They're now sort of headlining, and they're holding these main stage roles as the weekend in was their theatre habit. With just the impact that this can have, it only takes one adult to change a child's life, and that doesn't have to be the full-time carer. A lot of the research suggests it often isn't. Let's get into kids' lives in this way, and let's give them the opportunity that I've got to be wrapped around.
So for our listeners who may be as inspired as I was by all of this, where should they go? How do they find you and express interest in signing up or exploring further?
Super simple. Just our website is the best place to begin. Only 3 W's. www.nowfoster.org. We will be in touch very, very fast. One of the things we've been doing is redesigning the way that assessment and recruitment works, and we're quite excited by all that tech wizardry. So it's a smooth and good process. But there are events we hold on there for people who are just interested in finding out a little bit more. You don't have to go straight into having a conversation if that's not where you're at. The clip for the BBC on about Sarah is there, but really just begin with the website and talk about it. No, people don't need to be a couple. They don't need to own their home. There's a whole bunch of myths like that sometimes put people off. So everyone welcome. Really, everyone welcome.
Fantastic. Laurie, Katie, thanks for sharing and the passion and the vision. I hope this begins a big wave of greater interest. We'll put all the links, including the BBC one, in the show notes. I think that's very much worth sharing. And I hope that this village will wake up. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for yours. Thank you so much, Reva.
See you soon. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.